Hello and welcome. Thanks for joining me today. Let's talk about integrity and appropriation today. I've had lots of conversations with many people and been feeling the call to share something a little bit more widely around, respect and approach, and also permission to be who you are. Where I'd like to start is actually one of the most common things that I see around shamanism and shamanic healing is a general stereotyping and a lumping with believing that shamanism and being Native American is the same thing. And of course, most Indigenous communities have a lot of shamanic roots in them. In fact, most cultures around the entire globe have shamanic roots. So it isn't necessarily something specific to being Native American, nor is it the same thing, even though there's lots of overlap. That being said, I want to talk about the word shaman and shamanism for a minute. So what we have happening right now is a lot of finger pointing and a lot of gotcha in relationship to using appropriated words and saying the wrong thing that's not PC. And I've had a long walk with a lot of the pieces that I'm going to share about today. And I've been on many sides of the circle, and I'm sure I'll continue to be on different sides of the circle. And I just want to name that and share some of my journey with this work and language and where I'm at with it. So, of course, the word shaman comes from Siberia and has a specific tribal lineage. And so when I was first training in this work, I was taught very specifically that, you definitely wouldn't call yourself a shaman and to be very aware when you use the term. So for years, I had people actually seeking healing work from me, and I hid myself a lot because I had this belief that I wasn't supposed to claim what I do, right? And yes, it is true that the term shaman probably comes from the specific lineage. And where I am with it now, after sitting with it for years, like years of working through this piece in myself, is that at this point in time, there really isn't a word that is understood across the board to speak to this similar process and similar way of being and worldview. And so even though it is, like, I'm not going to deny that that is from Siberia, right? And remembering that all cultures have shamanic roots. And I found that avoiding using this word actually sort of diluted the message and made what it is that I do when I teach more confusing and less accessible. And, I played around with calling my work something different for a long time, again, to be respectful towards the term. But again, it seemed like it actually just diluted what was happening and made it harder for people to talk about this work. And so I kind of thought of it like, I'm not sure what's right or wrong, but, it'd be like going to India and studying yoga with specific guides there, and then not wanting to use the term yoga. So coming back and teaching the exact practice of yoga, but calling it spiritual stretching or naming it something else. And like, that doesn't feel true or right either. There's a way that feels like covering up what it actually is and what's actually happening. So I've chosen to continue to use the word shaman, understanding where it comes from, because it is the most accessible to most people, and it is the word that has now become a word that is most commonly understood when we're talking about this realm of work. So, no matter how much work I've done around permission for myself to move forward with my work, it's still going to look like appropriation to some people. And what I've found is I can be okay with that. There's a way that that is their process to work through, and I don't have to embody their belief about what I'm doing. I can be understanding, right? I can have compassion for where they are, but it doesn't mean that I have to stop being who I am or teaching what I came here to do and to teach because somebody else is struggling with how to find peace with that, right? And also, I don't have to accommodate other people's triggers. So again, I mean, I have compassion and empathy for what it must feel like. And of course, there is some extent that I will not ever understand because of the race that I've embodied in this lifetime, right? And that doesn't mean that I have to walk on glass around people or accommodate other people's triggers. And in fact, there's a way that that sort of feeds the fire on this separation that we're in. So I can be available to listen, but I've also realized, and I'm sharing this because you might be experiencing this as well, that I don't actually need to prove or explain myself or justify myself or come up with some sort of evidence that actually I am okay and you shouldn't judge me, right? And what I find is I get a lot of outreach and comments and emails from people that come in sort of just making me wrong right off the bat. And again, I can be understanding for where they are and why they're coming in with that. And I also get it because I have been there to some extent. I've certainly seen, after like over a decade of training, I've certainly devoted my life to this work and to training and my own integrity with training. And it is frustrating to see somebody take a weekend class and think that they know a thing or can do a thing. And I'm aware that there are a lot of people out there that aren't in the best integrity with the work or don't fully understand what it is that they take on when they say that they do shamanic work. And there's a way that I spent a long time really trapped in because other people do that. If I were to come forward with my work, then I would be bad. And I began to notice how I started to use ethics as a way of really keeping myself held back. And there again, I was getting caught in that spot, and then my work wasn't coming forward, and I wasn't able to serve people in the way that I came here to serve. So, Other places that I've found here is when I am approached by somebody who wants to finger point or has some things to say about what it is that I'm doing, is oftentimes what they come in with is where have you trained? And here again, sometimes I'm happy to engage in that conversation. I think it's important to have conversation. But also, if I'm reading the energy of somebody coming in that is already committed to not being happy no matter what I say, I'm really not going to waste my time and engage in that conversation. And I'm especially not going to do it on Facebook for the most part, where there really isn't room to establish understanding, So, I've had questions around that as well with bringing my work forward, sharing it on social media, and am I just adding to the noise or to misconceptions? And here again, there's a piece where you kind of just have to let people have their own journey with it and not stop being who you are because it might leave a bad impression on somebody or give some misinformation. And also, that's one of the reasons that I'm coming back to this conversation today, is I don't want to leave a lot of sort of open-ended ideas unaddressed. So I want to be direct about some of these things. So one place that I would like to address is the belief that you, one, have to be native to do this work. And of course, again, this is not true. Although in some specific lineages, there are rules and protocols around who can do what and in what way. So understanding that some people are going to believe that and other people are not. And it's just like having different sects within Christianity. Some people believe one thing, some people don't, and it doesn't make either of them wrong, right? Another place that I see a lot of misconceptions is that in order to, if you were to actually do this work, that you would somehow be automatically egoic. If you were to actually say that you're a healer or say that you're a shaman or offer your work, automatically your ego or your narcissist. And what I find over and over again and especially for me in my journey, and this comes back to the ethics again, is that I was using that also as a way of holding myself back and not offering my service and my work to the world. And actually, what I realized is the part of me that was telling myself that it would be egoic to bring this forward was actually my ego, because the ego is what keeps us separate. It's not necessarily, sometimes it's the part of us that like tries to make us bigger than we are, right? And, inflates us. But often the ego is the part of us that keeps us small. And so actually, since I have a tendency to avoid being in the, front, avoid having pictures of me, preferring to not be in the limelight, preferring to not get attention, that actually my healing is being okay with that, bringing it forward. And this is related to integrity, right? And being, experiencing the full spectrum of who you are as a human. Similarly, with money, same place, where it was like, I totally understand the qualms with charging money, and especially with charging a lot of money for the work that you might offer. And people need to eat. I'm a human. I also need food and shelter. And so the idea that somehow you're automatically out of integrity by expecting an exchange for your work is bullshit. It's old paradigm. And this is a way that oftentimes we continue to finger point to keep each other small or to keep ourselves small. And what I notice is oftentimes when somebody does come at me with a little bit of violence around doing this, that there's a place in them where they haven't given themselves permission to receive. And so the judgment that they're projecting onto me is often actually a result of what they're experiencing internally and what they want, but haven't allowed themselves to admit yet. Right. Yeah. So, I also want to share a little bit about some of the other things that might come up while you journey into this work. So many of us, many people have the experience of, in some sort of spiritual work, being approached by a Native American in journey work or in meditation or in a dream. And so this is an interesting topic and conversation. And here again, just to be direct, sometimes that might be a calling from a specific tribe, but I find more often than not, that is coming up less because of, maybe your past life, although that can happen. And I'll share more about that in just a minute, but more because if you're living in the United States, then of course you would be in touch with the beings and the spirits that have been here and that have been of service to the land for the longest time. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you were Native in a past life. Also, you might have been. Many of us might have been. Again, because all of us are indigenous to the earth, at some point in our lifetimes, we have been an indigenous person. And so you might have experiences with your past life, experiencing that. And where I want to be direct is just because you have had an experience with yourself as that and as a past life, or as being a witch in a past life, or being, attacked for your spirituality in the past life, that doesn't actually, that's not the same as being a minority in this life. And there's a way that sometimes we want to relate to others because we've had this experience. And I just want to bring awareness there and offer you be very full of care in doing this. So you can use these experiences as your own affirmation, but it is not the same as somebody who is embodied in a person of color in this lifetime and has actually experienced, the most violent aspects of colonialism. Also, we all are affected by colonialism, so there's a way that we sort of continue to further this divide and embody the thing we don't want to be by, finger pointing and trying to make other people wrong so that we can feel like we're not the bad guy. Yeah. Let me see what else I want to share here. So I see opening up shamanism and shamanic healing as there's a worry that if more people have access and experience with this work, that it will somehow automatically dilute it. And this may be the case. And I just want to share one other piece. Actually, I'm backtracking to some of the finger pointing, is I also was sort of tracking for a while. Oftentimes, many of the folks that would cast some judgment on me for the work that I'm offering also had involvement with some other work that came from outside of their culture. So, somebody would accuse me of appropriating, but they taught Kung Fu and they were white, or, or they taught yoga or Reiki or something like that. So it was always really fascinating to see where that comes up. And again, I think that just points out a little bit of that finger pointing, where it's like, if I can make you bad for doing this thing, then I don't have to feel bad for the thing that I'm doing. And on the flip side, sometimes we see other people assume that they're doing the bad thing and then keep ourselves held back because we don't want to be the bad thing like they are, when really what we need is permission, again, to be who we are. And with shamanism and shamanic healing, again, these teachings are specifically from the earth and from the cosmos. So if you've had experience with them, more likely than not, especially if you are on an authentic path, you're likely to have a lot of direct experiences that don't come from a teacher or don't come from a lineage or don't come from a tribe or a book, but from your actual experience. And they might mirror teachings that you might see in other cultures. And that doesn't mean that they're not true to you or that you shouldn't share them. And again, here we are kind of back at the roots of shamanism, are part of the roots of pretty much all humans on earth. So many people are taught through direct experience. And it doesn't make them wrong, and it doesn't mean that they shouldn't share their experience. So where I see shamanism going, I have also been on the walk with like, if I offer this more, people might make assumptions, people might take a weekend class and run with it, people might misuse the term. While I am watching that and my integrity with how I offer my work and how I teach and how I train people, I also feel that here again, it's better to have more people have some experience with this work and their own deep healing than it is to hide it and keep it closed and separate. And really where I see things going is actually, to be quite honest, where I see things going is there's like a place with shamanism where we really see it as this like powerful, really magical spiritual thing. And it certainly is. But these are sort of like the bright lights of spirituality that aren't really the truth of the depth of what's happening. And so maybe using the word might be some of that bright light. And also, if the work is getting out there, good, that's the point. And it's not necessarily the point of managing the way that it wants to move. It's its own thing moving through us, right? We don't actually have control over it. And so I really see it as as work gets out there more and more people are called to this work and this training and this self-exploration, that actually specifically white people or specifically Westerners are relearning self-responsibility and how to weave that back into community and be in communion with their community, in relationship with their community in a really good way. And that's really the long-term goal or vision for me, is actually about healing the community and our relationship with each other as humans and our relationship with the earth. It's actually not about making a bunch of healers, although that is a really amazing byproduct. So the whole point is getting into direct experience and integrating your own direct experience into your personal story. It's not about who's doing what and who's different than you and the rules. And so I encourage you to hold this place of both, where we can have some room and some permission to allow these natural experiences that happen for many of us to be allowed to be voiced and shared. And also, of course, to still remember that there is a lot of pain and hurt from our relationship, especially with specifically Native Americans. And so being a shaman is not the same as playing Indian. And please have some respect and awareness around that. If you don't actually have proper training in the lineage, be respectful and don't take it or teach it. If you don't actually have permission to use certain tools, be aware of that and don't use them. And also, you'll be taught things and given permission from spirit directly. And so that is the relationship that you actually need to nurture and honor the most. And of course, your relationship to your heart and your purpose. And, again, we want to be respectful of other people, but we can't tiptoe around each other's triggers. And ultimately, what it comes down to is you have to be true to yourself and what you are here to do. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. And I'm always interested in furthering this discussion. So if you relate to any part of what I'm sharing today, or you'd like to explore more in a compassionate way, without judgment, then you're welcome to join me in my private Facebook group, Creating Pathways. The link, of course, for that is in the bio. If you're watching this in the Facebook group, then I look forward to having a closer discussion with you here.